that person, we're standing here right now, what do you say to that person?
Why? You son of a bitch. Why?
Our town lost their innocence. You hear of stuff, terrible things happening in the big cities, but you never hear of it here.
This city of 3,000 is on edge. 2 bodies found, no one in custody.
The bodies have been positively identified as Abigail J. Williams, 13 of the Delphi area, and Liberty Rose Lynn German, 14 of the Delphi area. This is considered a double homicide investigation.
Who would be so barbaric? Who would kill 2 teenage girls?
The police are constantly asked, why hasn't this case been solved? Why haven't they figured this out?
There were tons of kids out there that day because, well, it was unseasonably nice. And it was, hey, we're out of school, can we go?
And can tacos lead to tips? In Delphi, outside crowded Mitchell's Fresh Mex, they hope so.
It's been out of this world.
Long lines of customers.
Our first order was from a factory here in town, and they bought food for their whole crew, and they also threw an extra $500 on top.
Many people already consider pizza a comfort food, but the owners here at the Delphi Pizza King are using their pizza to ease the burden.
Let's work on these right here.
Owners Tracy Martin, Tracy Bradshaw, and their crew are hopping. Orders and donations are pouring in.
We've had phone calls from Indianapolis that they're on their way today. We had donations from Colorado come in today. Florida, Nebraska. 20, 40.
Wanda Campbell is from Monticello, picking up a large order for her co-workers, sales associates at the Walmart there. And that support is flowing out the door here by the armload. These boxes are going to Kirby Risk employees in Lafayette.
Here from Logansport for a pizza fundraiser for Abby&Libby at Delphi Pizza King.
So you had a large pepperoni?
Brought my family with us to just try to help out somehow, you know.
2.5 hours. $35.79.
Sunrise reporter Matt McCutcheon is at Create Hair Studio in Camden, where the support they're seeing.
Naomi, good morning. We are here inside the hair salon here in Camden, joined by Jenna, the owner. You are preparing for quite a busy day today. What do you have going on here for Abby and Liberty?
Today we are offering $10 haircuts for adults and $5 haircuts for kids. We also had a hairstylist from Kokomo offer her services as well, and then a nail tech from Rossville is coming in, Terry Eichert, and she's going to do $15 manicures, or $10 manicures, $15 pedicures.
I know your salon's getting ready to open at 9 o'clock. When we take a look around, people are getting ready for that, but
outside the middle school, where Libby and Abby played sports and music and played with friends.
You get pepperoni, sausage, cheese, breadsticks, cookies, and I'm giving away Sam.
Serving up the pizza. And baked into every pie and behind every purchase, a goal. Fund drives have already raised close to $220,000 for the reward fund. No arrest yet, but hopes raised with every dollar raised.
Tonight, another business in Delphi is holding a fundraiser. A Papa John's pizza trailer is setting up shop at the Delphi Community Middle School.
There have been, again, several fundraisers over the past 3 weeks. Now take a look at this one. This was in the parking lot of Libby and Abby's elementary school. Papa John's sold pizza. Our crew saw several people stop by for a slice, some even driving away with several pizzas in their arms.
Beck also says she felt compelled to help. So Beck's restaurant is holding a pork cook-off beginning at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. It's at the Burlington Fire Department and costs $10 to enter.
People will come out to a memorial concert in their honor this summer right here at the Dusty Trail Saloon in Kokomo.
Now the folks at this venue in Kokomo want to help the families of Abby Williams and Libby German do just that with a concert in the girls' memory.
Well, it's a sports complex per se, but it's really a couple of softball fields and a park. And that's from both families. The park portion is so the community can really come around and enjoy that. There's some very neat things that we're going to include in that. We sat down with Anna last night, ate some mushrooms, didn't we? And discussed some really neat things she brought to the table that I think we'll roll those out at some point. But it's really going to be a neat thing as part of the park. We sat down with Anna last night, ate some mushrooms, didn't we? And
Travis Serafin was named Eden Prairie Officer of the Year in 2011, but his name has now jeopardized the future of at least 35 cases in Hennepin County.
Well, it's devastating. I've been a prosecutor in Hennepin County for over 30 years. I've never seen anything like this.
Chief Deputy County Attorney David Brown says the trouble stems from a search warrant Detective Serafin obtained for a case involving this South Minneapolis apartment in 2017.
The officers found a large amount of heroin and some fentanyl in the house, and a much smaller amount of drugs in a vehicle.
But Brown says Serafin did not get a search warrant for the car. Instead, he allegedly altered the original warrant for the home and then lied under oath, calling the discrepancy a clerical error.
The fair trial of a defendant depends upon the truthful testimony of the witnesses. That did not happen here.
And that will impact all of Serafin's cases opened or closed after the warrant was filed last September. 32 cases where he was a critical witness will be dismissed. In another 11 cases, he was a peripheral witness, and defense lawyers have been contacted.
We would not trust him as a witness for any further prosecution. I believe they are in the process of terminating him, but that is a question for Eden Prairie.
In a statement, Eden Prairie Police wouldn't comment on the active investigation, adding the department holds officers to extremely high ethical standards. The department also affords officers time for due process if their actions are called into question.
While there should have never been this kind of dishonesty, in the first place, everyone has done their best to repair the damage as soon as possible.
The first question is when do you have an obligation to preserve? And the court has clearly said that if you have this distinct possibility of litigation, you have a duty to preserve evidence. And then the next question is, all right, who has to preserve it? This morning I was presenting a program on spoliation of evidence, the destruction of evidence. Spoliation meaning alteration, destruction, and even concealment of evidence.
The Patties confirmed to us that at one point Mr. Allen processed some photos for them at the local CVS and didn't make them pay for them. They you know, there was a rumor out there, and they said, yep, that happened. Did you know that happened?
I didn't. I know that we have the human element. We have a very solid science element. We're using every capable process that we have from a scientific perspective, as everyone would expect us to, and we will continue to do that until there's nothing left to do.
Would that include DNA?
It does.
Was DNA found at the scene?
It includes DNA.
We haven't ruled out the possibility that it's a local person. Every time we can clear somebody, it gets us closer, where we're confident that somewhere in these tips that we have some valuable information. Every time we can eliminate one, we can move on to the next.
Anytime we're talking about this case is a good day. So for that, I say thank you to the folks that brought this out today during the news conference that occurred earlier. I encourage the dialogue. I encourage their opinions. I encourage them perpetuating a model of awareness, because somebody out there knows who did that to those 4 little girls.
You got 4 little girls gone. Money ain't gonna bring them back.
6 years later, no arrests, not even any apparent suspects. So why won't law enforcement talk about the Flora fire?
For my kids. Just come to peace for the girls. Like, if it ain't for me or whoever, just, there were 4 lives that has been taken from me. And I wouldn't wish it on nobody ever in life.
I would want them to be remembered by the goodness that they had in them, the children that they were. They're not here to continue with their lives. I want all positive, good vibes.
I want my babies here with me.
This county suffered quite a bit of loss. 6 little girls in about 4 months' time,
Yeah.
4 in an arson fire, 4 sisters, months before Abby and Libby.
November to February. Yeah.
So, and we're approaching that anniversary
We are.
for the Flora fire.
We are.
Months before Abby and Libby.
November to February. Yeah. November to February. Yeah.
So, and we're approaching that anniversary
We are.
for the Flora fire.
We are.
So they're just as much on your mind today as Abby and Libby.
They've never left my mind. No matter what people say, they've never left my mind. Very different cases. Both have tragic outcomes.
When you leave here today, are you taking the long way home?
Longer than I did coming up. Yeah.
Delphi is Delphi, Flora is Flora. But I would have appreciated a little bit more help, a little bit more concern about my family as they did the other families.
The cases and investigations are very different, but the tragic outcome is the same. When there's loss of life,
individuals, how many investigators have participated in this case and in an attempt to lead to an arrest?
Hundreds over time.
Are you aware of any other cases that have had that many individuals participate from an investigative standpoint?
Bob, in a year and a half or so, I'll finish my 40th year. I've never seen anything like this in my entire career.
This county of Carroll and all that has happened here and all of the sadness associated with this county is unacceptable in a civilized society. And you did everything you could to support us, but most importantly, you surrounded the family of these 2 little girls. Gosh, I'll never forget it. There'll be a tremendous amount of questions, I know that. Never in my career have I stood in front of something like this. Please be patient with us, please. We owe the community, we owe the family, we owe the state and literally the nation an explanation as to what happened. That's Anytown America, Marnie, it's Anytown America. And the level of violence, it just gut-wrenching to me to think about what happened to those little girls and then ultimately what happened to the community. But I would like to say, even through all the criticism and all the things that we've been through associated with this, which I understand I'm not being critical of, so much good has come of this. That community in Carroll County and Delphi is wonderful. The people there, how they've responded to this, how they've come together in such a terrible, terrible, terrible dark time is something that I'll remember till my final day. I've said all along that we as an agency will be here as long as I'm breathing and as long as Governor Holcomb allows me to continue to stay in the position that I hold. I have the opportunity to brief him regularly. This isn't about how many hours we spend. It's not about how much it costs. It's about every single asset that the ISP has we will give to this sheriff, this community, and to each and every one of you. Because I refuse to accept evil as a standard bearer in American society, not here. See, this is Carroll County, and specifically the Delphi is that represented evil, complete evil amongst humanity. And that little county has been dealt several blows. Just a few months before that, there were 4 little girls killed in a house fire that was intentionally set. So that's any county in America. And I have this extraordinary responsibility to bring closure to that, and I'll work towards that end until my final day. As with any major case, it ebbs and flows, right? I mean, the rhythm, it ebbs and flows. And this one is certainly no different. When it does slow down, it gives these incredible servants standing behind me an opportunity to take a breath. Then about the time they get that breath, something else happens and they fire right back up into high gear. I have no indication to believe that that's going to stop or slow down. To the people dressed funny like me and those that represent the law enforcement profession, please understand we're human beings just like you. I'd stand anywhere in the nation with people standing behind me. And I would suggest to you that every time something like this happens, a little piece of us dies as well. But I also want you to understand how committed we are as a collective one, and we will continue. This has been briefed all the way up to the director of the FBI, Director Comey, and Greg Mass is going to talk a little bit about that. I've had an opportunity to speak to my boss, Governor Eric Holcomb, a couple different times about this situation. And every time I do, I see this look that comes over his face, just like yours and this community's. And that's the unfortunate experience of experiencing evil. We're not stopping. If you choose to be critical of our silence, be critical of me, not the front line. These are the folks that have committed their entire lives to a successful conclusion. In other words, a guilty verdict. These are the folks that have committed their entire lives to a successful conclusion. Conclusion. Again, Nick has been very resolute and very clear, and I'm most grateful for his leadership. And it's going to be really important as we move forward.
There are lots of questions because the Carroll County prosecutor filed a request at the courthouse. Why is information in this case, why is the probable cause affidavit not released right now?
Once the prosecutor made the decision to do that and the judge signed that document, it took it completely out of our hands. I believe in the probable cause. I've read it multiple times. I believe in that probable cause, and I believe in its outcome. I think one of the reasons is because it's captured the attention of the world, because it's Everytown USA. It's Everytown USA. It's your daughter and it's mine. It's her friend and it's my daughter's friend. I think that's one of the reasons that it's captured the attention of. It's haunted me. Yes, I have. And then I'd pick up the phone and I'd call one of those detectives and say, hey, it's me, how you doing today? And I'd hang up that phone and I'd think, oh man, they don't feel that way. So I would be at peace again.
No one in this room should have access to those records.
Sure, it is unusual. We don't do it very often in all the cases that we handle here in Carroll County. We did it in this case because the investigation is still open. And while all cases are important, the nature of this case has some extra scrutiny with it. And so my office, felt it was important to seal those records. And so felt it was important to seal those records.
Much for having me.
You know,
awesome.
One of the things a few weeks ago after you were at the podium announcing that you'd made an arrest for Abby and Libby, I just felt like a sense of relief, like relief because this was one huge step towards finally getting some justice for Abby and Libby. I know you were quite emotional at that podium, at that press conference a few weeks ago. Did you feel a sense of relief? I mean, I know you're working with several different agencies, but you're kind of the face. You've been kind of the spokesperson for the investigation.
You know, I couldn't wait for that day. And then when I finally got there, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to think or how I was going to feel. But the most important thing to me was to see how that community might begin, but most importantly of all is a family. And it was a very strange emotional day. It was an intense press conference too, because there were so many questions you couldn't answer and the prosecutor couldn't answer. And I could feel some frustration on the part of reporters in that room, because I know this investigation is still ongoing. I don't blame them a bit for being frustrated. I don't blame them a bit. But we have to remember that now that we're where we are, it's not a community interest story. It's very factual now, and we have to be very careful. I think that's what everybody expects. So on one hand, we say to the media, thank you, and I really do mean that, for keeping this front and center, not just nationally, but even globally. But then the other side is when you have questions, we can't answer them. So I understand that frustration. I really, truly do.
And I know you can't answer every question that we have here, but we're going to fire away anyway. Is the guy in custody, Richard Allen, is he the only person being looked at in this investigation?
Right now, he's the one that's been that's now facing murder charges. So, again, we are not going to stop looking at other people until this is completely done and we have nothing left to do. So, 70,000 plus tips, hundreds have come in since 2 weeks ago. Week ago Monday, I guess, and we'll continue to receive those tips and look into them as you would expect.
If this affidavit is released, and there's a hearing coming up, I believe, on the 22nd, that's got some information that led to the arrest of Richard Allen, the suspect. If that is allowed to be given to the public, is that going to compromise the investigation in any way?
No, I don't think at this point it will, and I think it'll answer a lot of the questions that people have. And
will we find out how we got to this point with that information?
Yeah, it'll be much clearer.
What could happen? Can you give us a hypothetical of what could happen if investigators say too much too soon? If somebody, and it doesn't have to be with this case in particular, just a hypothetical of a murder case, and somebody on the team or in the prosecutor's office says something that they shouldn't have. What's the domino effect that could happen potentially if you reveal too much information in a case like this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is there are things that we know that only the killer would know, and I'm speaking generally, and it's an investigative strategy, obviously, that if we know what the killer knows and nobody else does, that when we do talk to the killer, we'll have a clearer idea of what occurred. And that's a very similar strategy that we've used here.
One of the things that I've heard is why not release the cause of death? Not because people are morbidly curious, but if they knew they were looking for somebody that was either a stab or a gunshot, maybe they know somebody that sold the gun, sold the knife. Maybe they could find the weapon somewhere. What's the rationale for not releasing the official cause of death?
Because the individual or individuals that did it, only they know what they did.
But do you think that's, and I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, has that slowed down the investigation? Because I think the public, with all of their tips, has been a big help in this. Wouldn't it make sense to have the public looking for the possible weapon?
I don't think at this point it would. Functionally, I understand the question, Hammer. I really do understand it. And we're going to look back on this and probably realize, dang it, I wish we'd have done A, B, and C rather than D and E.
Right.
But now's not the time for us to change that strategy and talk about everything that we know.
What did you think when, like, a lot of news has happened with the story since you made the announcement of the arrest? Richard Allen has been moved to a state facility. The Carroll County judge has recused himself. Did that concern you at all, that the judge in this case, after 5 years of having been being prepared for this day, all of a sudden is now saying, well, we don't have enough resources to facilitate this. I'm stepping down and we're going to move it somewhere else. Did that concern you?
Yeah, it did. It doesn't anymore. It was, again, that day was very unusual for all of us, the family, the community, the country, the world, period. It was very unusual. And then the reality struck of where we were. And I think that struck the judge at the same time. And I appreciate him having the ability and the courage to step up and step out and say, you know what, this is too big for me. I didn't know what was going to happen, but here's what's currently happening. Here's the influx. And with this small number of people in a very rural county, it's not something that we can perpetuate and manage.
Another piece of information that came out since the arrest, and this was just the last couple of days, is that maybe this guy, Richard Allen, has been on the radar for a long time. Did he speak to investigators? Did he speak to police in the early stages of this investigation?
That'll all come out in due time. I'm not going to talk about Richard Allen today.
Yeah, that Wish. There was a story on Wish TV, our news gathering partners, about some police sources and some information. Did you see that yesterday?
I did.
The search of the Wabash River. They're saying a source is linked to the Delphi investigation. Like Hammer said about Richard Allen, how long he's been on the radar. When you see a story like this, is it? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it frustrating, especially when you see a police source confirmed this? That's what they're saying.
That's a leak from within, right?
Is that? It is frustrating. I will say yes. It is absolutely frustrating because we can't talk about what we think, and I've said this many times before. You should expect us to only talk about what we know. And that even changes more so once there's a probable cause affidavit signed by a judge for the arrest of an individual. Not just Richard Allen, but in any criminal case, especially a complex criminal case. This case is unlike any that I've seen in almost a 40-year career. So there are so many different tentacles to this. It's very complex. And, shame on us for saying something that might jeopardize that. So whoever this, quote, source is, I doubt very seriously that individual is a part of the core team.
One more thing on the Delphi story before we move on to something else. I have been pretty critical of some of these press conferences. You touched on it earlier. You understand why the press would be a little upset. My beef with a lot of these early on was that it felt like these things were happening just for the sake of happening. There was no new information. And the reason I felt that way, I was trying to think, if I was the parent of one of these young ladies, I feel like I would be getting my hopes up every time one of these press conferences would happen, but then they would happen and there's no new information. And then it would feel like sometimes there'd be some theatrics, like some cliches being thrown out there, which, again, felt like it was getting the hopes up of these families. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I can see your perspective, but that wasn't the case. There was one press conference I can remember specifically that Mike and Becky were not aware of. And I regret that. I take responsibility here. And if there's going to be criticism, I want it to come to me. But over time, it was important that we kept talking about this.
Right.
And Hammer, had we not done that, we wouldn't have been able to say to the media, thank you for keeping it front and center. So,
asking for tips,
and information.
Yeah.
Everybody expects everything to be solved through science today, and that's just always not the case. It's a combination of all of it. So the human impact has been really, really fascinating to watch. And again, we didn't have a playbook here, and we did the very best we could for over 5.5 years.
What do you think the biggest mistake has been? Can you talk about that? Like, I know there's an ongoing investigation, but a couple times today you've said, we're going to learn from this. We've made mistakes. Yeah. Give me an example.
Was the sketch, the two sketches?
No, I don't think that was a mistake at all. That was frankly a pretty effective strategy that kept information coming our way.
Because the second one looked nothing like this guy that's into custody. The first one, you could put a side-by-side up with Richard Allen, and you can say, I see that. The second one looked nothing like that guy.
Yeah, isn't that something?
But was that the right thing to put that out? Because clearly it doesn't look like him.
Well, again, remember, the photo or a sketch is not a photograph. It's a sketch based on human recollection. So I was convinced that eventually we were going to put those together and we were going to be able to take them apart, and there's going to be the individual. So, we're human beings. We're expected to be superhuman. We're not. And we do the best we can every single day. And that's what we'll continue to do.
When someone says, I think Superintendent Carter just loves to see himself on television. What's your response?
Oh, that's crazy. No, I'm aging like an old farm dog. That's not the case at all. You know, what I'm trying to do is keep community and areas around the state aware of what we're doing as much as we possibly can, because this isn't okay.
If you hear this today and you think, my God, that sounds like fill in the blank, call us. Make an anonymous tip.
As poor as this picture is, somebody knows. And if you're watching, we'll find you.
But I really believe that over time we're going to have an idea that we were onto something early on. The unique feel because of the community outreach, and because we had a video, we had audio of our killer, and I can tell you, sitting in that command center a week afterwards, it just seemed like we were on the right track, and here we are almost 3 years later.
Take a look inside that investigation. This is Ground Zero, the command center for detectives in Delphi. There are volunteers manning the front desk around the clock. There's even a lie detector machine in one of the rooms there. Pictures of the girls, encouraging messages from local high schoolers, they hang on the walls. They chase thousands of tips, but still aren't sure if their main suspect is local or from another state.
I don't want people to think that we've given up, that we've pushed our chairs back and said we're finished, because that's not the case.
No, not even close. I said all along, once we finish, we're going to start all over again.
Yeah.
I don't believe in a cold case.
Right.
With technology today, the way in which human beings communicate today, and with the interaction, I remember Jerry Holman and the sheriff at Carroll County saying once, when we're all done, we're going to start all over.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we'll do.
Absolutely.
You say eventually the world is going to know. Does that mean you are close, in your opinion?
I think we're closer every day. We're closer every single day. The tips keep coming. And once that comes in, and once that completes itself, then we're going to have to assign another 60 or 80 detectives to this and go back through every single lead that we've ever gotten. I'm confident that there'll be a successful conclusion. People have said, did you think it'd be a year? I don't know. I don't know. How do you answer that question? I believe we're one piece of the puzzle away from figuring out who this individual is. Then the real work begins. Over 30,000 tips. Thank heavens the FBI was engaged with us, with the Orion system and the expertise that the FBI brought from all over the country to allow us to manage that kind of data. We've had inquiries and requests for discussion from agencies all over the country, not only because this is such a high-profile case, but because of the complexities associated with the time since we found their bodies a year ago tomorrow.
How many tips did police receive early on, and how did you sort through what was potentially helpful and what wasn't?
Well, we had so many we couldn't manage them early on. And we're up to around 46,000 now. That's why we brought in the system the FBI offered. That helped us not only collect that, because remember, we can't, even though we collect it, we have to know what the action was, because I think that we're just one tip away. So we have to make darn good and sure that we follow up on those tips that are appropriate, and then we properly catalog them, because once the arrest is made, the investigation starts all over again. So that's when the real work's going to begin again. So it's really important that we track data.
Yeah, and it's important to keep some of that stuff to yourself, right? So that you have that when we go to trial.
We know a lot. But I've seen such enormous outpouring of support, and not just for people dressed funny like me, but for really for everybody up there. They taught us a lot about humility, and they taught us a lot about human interaction, and a lot about caring for one another, and they didn't even know it. They didn't even know it at the time.
The Delphi police station behind us, you can see the second floor windows are darkened there. They have been light bright every night because it's been 24/7 an operation where they're getting calls in from people. That tip line was based right up there. It's dark now because it's been moved to Washington, D.C., but the search for answers continues here on the ground. Photo of the call center that fielded 4,000 tips. The operation now moved to the FBI in Washington. Half those tips came in after police released this Wednesday.
The person or persons who killed Libby German and Abby Williams. The reward fund continues to grow. This stack of donations arrived over the weekend.
We're here for the long haul.
A task force of 20 police agencies moved into a new, bigger, more permanent headquarters on Delphi's town square. 9,000 tips and more than 100 detectives working almost 2 weeks since the girls were found murdered haven't been able to identify a single suspect.
Well, I think anytime we receive information and we're able to even just cross a suspect off our list, we're making
And tip line, just anything that you might know, please call it in because we want to make sure that these people are brought to justice for Libby and Abby's sake.
On Thursday, the Delphi murder tip line that was running through 10 phone lines in the upstairs of the Delphi Municipal Building has now been rerouted to Washington, D.C. and the FBI Major Case Contact Center, where 150 people can monitor the lines. In the last 24 hours, more than 1,300 tips have rolled in by phone and another 400 by email. But as those tips come in and are checked out, the sheriff says don't expect to hear too much from law enforcement.
When we're at the end of the day with this, we're going to end up in this building over here at our county courthouse with this case. And so, from our perspective, obviously, we have to make sure we've got it right.
Tonight, a source close to the investigation confirmed to 13 News a clerical error from an FBI civilian employee led to Richard Allen being overlooked as a suspect in 2017, something the FBI disputes. They tell us the implication that a clerical error by an FBI employee led to years of delay in identifying Allen is misleading, and that their review shows FBI employees correctly followed procedure. Now, earlier today, we reached out to the families of Abby and Libby for comment, and just an hour ago, Libby German's sister, Kelsey, responded. She tells us, "I have full faith in the team working on the case and will continue to support them in any way I can as we work toward a conviction and justice for Abby and Libby."
Jay Abbott has been the special agent in charge of the FBI's Indianapolis division since 2014. He'll retire at the end of this week, wrapping up a career that's focused on cold case homicides, public corruption, counterterrorism here in the United States and abroad in Paris. He's worked some major cases over that time, the so-called 20th hijacker from 9/11, Richard Reed, the man known as the shoe bomber who tried to light an explosive in his shoe, to name a few. But when he looks back on his 30-year career, and especially his time here in Indianapolis, he says one of the cases he feels regretful about are the unsolved murders of Abby Williams and Libby German.
We've all had a personal connection to that, and though it's not the FBI's case, Carroll County and Delphi Police Department and Indiana State Police are the lead, but they asked the FBI for our help. And I most certainly was very pleased to provide whatever help we could. And we provided a huge amount of help. But the fact that we've not been able to solve that case has been a disappointment. And I've already challenged my successor, Grant, that I want him to solve it on his watch, because I am confident, very confident that it will be solved. We have viable leads. We've just not been able to solve it yet. But it's so frustrating with the amount of leads and information that we haven't turned that corner yet. So I'm hopeful that that will happen.
Doug Carter, Superintendent of Indiana State Police, is a good friend and a great colleague during that time and continues to be a great friend. He came and asked for our assistance. As the special agent in charge of the FBI's Indianapolis division, I had during my tenure the option, the authority to provide whatever assistance he might want to the level that I thought was appropriate. I was absolutely enthused to unleash every FBI asset, technical ability, anything that we had to try to help him solve this case. Indiana State Police stayed the forefront in charge of the case. But I will tell you that there were those days when the FBI certainly had more personnel in and around Delphi than anyone else in law enforcement. Some days I think we were over 100 personnel that I was trying to keep track of, all doing various things in different capacities, whether it was with the command post, videography type things, voice type analysis, crime scene experts, behavioral analysis experts, and then of course just numerous agents pounding the pavement and running down leads that we had from thousands and thousands of tips.
This fall, nearly 6 years after the murders, authorities decided to review all tips, prompting investigators to take another look at Richard Allen.
It seems from the affidavit that police circled back to Allen as a suspect when, quote, investigators reviewing prior tips encountered a tip narrative from an officer who interviewed Richard M. Allen in 2017. The affidavit states detectives spoke to Allen again on October 13, 2022. They executed the search warrant the same day and found the gun, which a lab later matched to the unspent bullet found at the scene. So again, why did it take 5 years for them to circle back to Allen? He placed himself right near the scene. He generally matches the description of the man seen in Libby's cell phone video and subsequent sketches authorities have released over time. Now, I'm sure there's a lot more information we're not getting from the affidavit here, but I just don't get it. May I be missing here with regard to this affidavit in the 5-year period?
So basically what we're learning from our reporting is that this delay may have been the result of some sort of clerical error where Allen's name was sort of possibly misfiled, and that prompted there to be a lot of time passing between when he first came on the radar and when they followed up on it.
Earlier this afternoon, the defense attorneys have withdrawn their representation of Mr. Allen. Mr. Baldwin made an oral motion to withdraw. I granted that oral motion to withdraw, and Mr. Rosie will be submitting a written motion to withdraw, I'm assuming within the next couple of days.
Rosie and Baldwin both say they want to stay on the case, and they're now fighting back. Yesterday and today, Rosie and Baldwin filed new court filings, claiming the judge coerced them into stepping down. The attorneys say last week in her chambers, Judge Gall falsely accused them of gross negligence. They claim the judge ambushed them and said if they did not withdraw from the case, she would publicly shame them in court and then disqualify them from continuing to represent Richard Allen. Rosie and Baldwin say their decision to step down was involuntary, and they are asking to remain on the case. But in a new twist today, the judge wiped out all public record of those requests. Judge Gall said since the attorneys withdrew, she has ordered their recent court filings to be stricken from the record, and she even ordered the clerk to also remove them from the electronic case file. That is a surprising and aggressive move that could prompt appeals by the defendant or the defense attorneys. Now, despite all that, just a few hours ago, Judge Gall announced the new defense team. William Labrado, Allen County's chief public defender, and Robert Scremin, another Fort Wayne attorney.
Then just this morning, a different group of attorneys filed a petition with the Indiana Supreme Court. They want the justices to rule the judge acted inappropriately by removing court records from the file. They want all the recent court filings reinstated.
Yesterday, Judge Gall refused to reinstate Andrew Baldwin and Bradley Rosie as Allen's attorneys. I talked to longtime defense attorney Ben Jaffe this afternoon. He says the state's high court has great leeway in how they rule on this petition.
I think they could reinstate these attorneys as the attorneys of record, as the appropriate attorneys. I think they could acknowledged their continued representation as pro bono counsel if they want. I think there's quite a bit they could do there. And the Supreme Court's well aware this is getting a lot of press. This is getting a lot of attention, national attention. So I do think they'll be careful and thoughtful in the way they look at this.
Richard Allen has made it clear that he wants Baldwin and Rosie to continue as his counsel. But Judge Gohl says the original attorneys engaged in gross negligence.
Thank you. You may be seated.
We are on the record in State of Indiana versus Richard Allen. I'll show that the state is here by Mr. McClelland, Mr. Luttrell, defense is here by Mr. Librato, Mr. Scremin, and I note yesterday, late, the written appearance by Mr. Rosie and Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Librato, earlier this morning, you filed a motion to continue the jury trial? That's correct, Your Honor. Go ahead, sir. I explained that to Mr. Allen. Okay, and what is the state's position? Judge, the state has no objection as long as the time is chargeable to the defendant. Okay. And, Your Honor, that's in our motion that we would accept all the CR4 time. Yeah, I show in paragraph 4 the state doesn't object as long as CR4 is charged to the defendant. Okay, so then we have the appearances by Mr. Rosie and Mr. Baldwin. Gentlemen? Judge, Mr. Allen has asked us to represent him, and we entered our appearance to represent him. Okay, well, as we had our hearing on the 19th, prior to that hearing, we had some discussions. Counsel, you withdrew. You chose to withdraw from the case, rather than be removed for gross negligence. What's changed in the 12 days? Well, Judge, I think I've made it abundantly clear in my pleadings with the court that the conduct of the tribunal in chambers a week and a half ago left us with no choice but to withdraw because we were going to put ourselves in a direct conflict with our client by sitting in the courtroom and accepting, what was a lashing, essentially, from Your Honor. And so that was a strategic move so as to protect our client's rights, and I think I've made that abundantly clear. I don't know how that couldn't be clear at this point. Beyond that, us transitioning from contracted public defenders to private counsel puts us in an entirely different situation with our client, which is the Sixth Amendment, his Sixth Amendment right to have representation. And to the extent that the court is trying to intervene into that right without some due process, it's my client's contention that that's just not appropriate, and he has his right to have counsel of choice. So I don't really know that there's much else to say. I think in the normal course of business, I'm a private practitioner. I was once a public defender. In the normal course of business, and in every other case I've been involved with, when there's a public defender assigned to a case, such as Mr. Scremin and Mr. Librato, excuse me if I messed your name up, but in every other case, when private counsel enters their appearance, the public defender taps out and basically private counsel gets up and running, and I don't see why this case should be any different. Well, again, you haven't answered my question that nothing has changed in the past 12 days since I found gross negligence on the part of the defense in representing Mr. Allen. Well, the answer to the question is that we didn't act grossly negligent, and the court has an opinion that's different than our opinion. And, at this point, without some due process and some findings with a notice, an opportunity to be heard, that we're just on a different page about how we acted and what our circumstances are. So that's the answer to the question. Does the state have any opinions or wish to weigh in? Judge, I guess I'm just at a loss at this point. We've struggled up to this point, Judge, and again, I was there in chambers in the meeting. I agree with the statements made by the court about the defense being grossly negligent. Again, this started back at our first hearing, back I believe in November, with the actions outlined by the court about defense's statement in chambers, and then a kind of direct 180 from that statement once they left chambers. And then there was a leak from the defense in December that wasn't made aware to the state or to the court until the state found out. Then we have the various motions that were filed with not only negligent statements, Judge, but I think outright lies. And I think that's been proven in court and hearings that we've had. We then have the Franks motion that was filed, Judge, What you have to outline in a Franks motion is very clear, and defense counsel spent over 100 pages outlining their theory of the case instead of argument for the Franks. And again, I think everything they've done, including the most recent leak, is just an effort by them to push this case out into the public and try this case in the public eye and not in this court. The state's concern is that Mr. Allen has a fair trial. That is the state's concern, but that goes both ways. We deserve to have a fair trial too, Judge. That right goes both ways. And I just don't think the actions by the defense can be attributable to anything else but gross negligence, Judge. So that's the state's opinion. Mr. Allen, I understand you wish to have Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie represent you in this matter. I have grave concerns, Mr. Allen, about their representation of you. The previous findings by this court of their gross negligence. Mr. Allen, you are entitled to adequate representation in your case. You are entitled to a vigorous defense in your case. And this is difficult, Mr. Allen, because I know what you want. You've indicated that through your attorneys. But I cannot and will not allow these attorneys to represent you with the concerns that I've had, with the gross negligence that I have found. They withdrew rather than be found grossly negligent and be removed. I can't do it, sir. I just can't. Judge, let me finish. I cannot allow that. I have appointed able counsel to represent you. Mr. Scremmen is here. Mr. Librato is here. They have an investigator here as well. I will grant their motion to continue your trial. And I'm sorry that this is happening to you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Librato, Mr. Scremmen, I know that you have not talked with the state. I know that you have not yet received discovery. There is no way that you can tell me when you will be ready for the trial. I have asked former counsel to cooperate. I have asked former counsel to provide discovery to you. It is my understanding that Mr. McClellan, you've indicated that has not been provided to you. Correct, Your Honor. Gentlemen, when can I expect that you would return the discovery to the state of Indiana? By the end of the week, perhaps today. That would be great. And if you could get it today, that would be wonderful. Then that can be provided to successor counsel. You are not required to cooperate with successor counsel. I hope that you would, in Mr. Allen's best interest, but that's entirely up to you. If you could have the discovery to the state by the end of this week, that would be great. I know that I'd previously entered an order that discovery was to be complete by November 1st. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Do you want to pick a trial date, Mr. Librato, Mr. Scremmen? Yes, Your Honor. Briefly speaking with the state, tentatively, we would like a trial date in November, but not knowing what exactly we're going to be getting, I can't tell the court with any certainty that we would be ready in November. We will do everything in our power to be ready by then. It's my understanding that it's a massive amount of discovery. It is. Karen, I know you brought the calendar in. Could we get a date in November? Okay, I'm looking at November 2024. There's an election day, there's a Veterans Day, and then Thanksgiving. If October, December would be October, that's fine, Judge. The state, whatever is fine with the court is fine with the state, Judge. Mr. Scremmen, Mr. Librato, October would be fine, Your Honor, for a start. Then why don't we look at October 14th as marked off? What is that? Columbus Day, Your Honor. Columbus Day? Thank you, Karen. You may mark that off. So we'll look at October 15th through the 31st. Fine, Judge. And we, again, would pick the jury in Fort Wayne and bring them here to Carroll County for the trial. There's a pending motion to suppress. There is the Franks that is not yet. I haven't finished even reading it or going through all of the hours of interviews that were provided on a flash drive. So you'll need a hearing date for that. Once you get the discovery and once you've had the opportunity to review the pleadings, you could either adopt those pleadings or make your own. It's up to you. Anything else from the state? Judge, we want to create a record to be clear on what you're doing. You are disqualifying Brad and me. Is that correct? Correct. We would like to be heard through my attorney, David Hennessy. Sure. Good morning, Your Honor. I do have a limited appearance on record which hasn't been removed or disqualified. The court has my preliminary memorandum about disqualification when Mr. Rosie and Mr. Baldwin were appointed counsel. This is yet different. The law that I gave the court is even more certain. The court appears to be saying that it's protecting Mr. Allen, but the court's finding of gross negligence was summary, without notice, without opportunity to be heard. Had you given Mr. Rosie and Mr. Baldwin notice of your intentions on October 19th when they were formed, which seems to be like a week earlier, then they could have been prepared. I can tell you this on behalf of both of these gentlemen. You would have the Indiana Public Defender Council come testify. You would have competent attorneys from across the state come testify. You would have defense counsel that have been declared experts in criminal defense. Mr. Baldwin's one of a handful of lawyers in the state that is certified in criminal defense. So your summary ruling violates the Constitution, and your summary ruling is unfair to everyone, especially Mr. Allen, because he was never able to make a record. Your finding of gross negligence, what you cited to them in chambers, which has never been put on the record, is not gross negligence. It's a zealous representation, maybe too zealous for the court's favor, but it was good lawyering. The memorandum on the Franks issue is a work of art. It's legal writing at its best. This has nothing to do with the Franks issue, sir. No, but that... Nothing to do with that, so please stay. No, it has to do with your finding of gross negligence, and what I'm citing to the court are the activities. I never mentioned the Franks. I'm sorry? Never mentioned the Franks hearing, never mentioned the motions, sir. Okay, you mentioned the transport orders. Unfortunately, the public and I was not allowed in representing Mr. Baldwin, and unfortunately, the public and I aren't privy to the recording of the session outside the presence of Mr. Allen. He has a right to be present at every critical stage of the proceedings. When the court coerces a withdrawal or quitting, that's a critical stage of the proceedings. He wasn't present. And I'd be happy to address each and every point that you think constitutes gross negligence. I've practiced criminal defense for 40 years. I understand and know in detail what these two lawyers have done on behalf of Mr. Allen has been nothing but zealous representation. So thank you. I have no expectation you'll change your mind for allowing us to make a more complete record about your finding of gross negligence in disregard for Mr. Allen and unfairness to Mr. Baldwin and unfairness to Mr. Rosie. Thank you, Mr. Hennessy. Thank you, Judge. Anything else from the state? No, Your Honor. Mr. Scremin? No, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Librato? No, ma'am. All right. Thank you very much. We've set a trial. We are in recess. Just to add some of my concluding thoughts here, we can sit here and talk about all the violations of Allen's constitutional rights, such as his right to choice of counsel that is guaranteed under the 6th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, as well as his rights to be present at all critical points of the proceedings and rights to due process, have been ruthlessly and inhumanely violated by Carroll County and Judge Fran Gall. When Judge Fran Gall made this finding of gross negligence, she does not cite either the state or U.S. constitutions. She doesn't provide any relevant case law or even professional rules of conduct. Her assertion is subjective, unsupported, and unlawful. And she's using this assertion, this opinion, this feeling that the defense attorneys give her without any sort of foundation of the law or findings of fact. She's using that opinion to delay Richard Allen's trial by another year. She's sending him back to prison for another year because she doesn't like the attorneys. Interestingly, the state attorney general's office has declined to represent both Judge Gall and Carroll County. The attorney general's office typically represents government officials in appeals and legal matters. So it is noteworthy that the attorney general's office said, nope, we're not going to represent the government in this matter. So Judge Gall actually had to hire her own attorney, and he's from Marion County. His name is Matthew Gutwine. And upon a couple Google searches, you may or may not find his name associated with $1 billion Medicaid fraud, allegedly. But that may shine some light on the company that Judge Gall keeps, and how her conduct may be similarly unethical, unlawful, and egregious. But that's not for me to decide. I'm just thankful that this matter has been accepted by the Supreme Court of Indiana, and I hope that the Supreme Court justices understand that Hoosiers, Americans, and citizens of the world are watching, and our faith in Indiana's criminal justice system, if any modicum still exists, lies in the balance of their ruling and their protection of the citizen, Richard Allen, in this matter.
I've heard from elected mayors, both Republican and Democrat, from other elected officials from around the state, local community groups, citizens, lawyers, judges, prosecutors, and people I've never even met have shown tremendous support. Now is our time. Now is our time, and we must acknowledge our system is not working. But I want to make something very, very clear to everyone. This is no one's fault. This is no one's fault. No one agency, no one judge, no one prosecutor, no one police agency, no one mayor, no one city county council, and that list could go on and on. The position that we have found ourselves in has happened over time. But it's sure been fast-tracked over the course of the last couple of years. Our time is now to get really uncomfortable with each other, to take full responsibility for all of our citizens and for all of our actions, not just one part of the system, but everybody involved in the system. We must evaluate what we do, why we do it, and then be transparent with very objective results. We must establish criteria for evaluation and then unapologetically accept it. We must not live within a shadow of accountability. Rather, we must embrace a structure where we encourage and publicly discuss accountability, just like you expect from us. Judges and prosecutors alike should be perpetually accountable through objective evaluation, or at least an evaluation period, where they must explain their decision-making processes, especially for violent felons. Especially for violent felons. Prosecutors and judges, even unelected ones, have absolute immunity, which means they cannot be held personally liable for their actions. We can and should do better.
The prosecutor didn't believe that Richard Allen wasn't the only one in this case. So that's one of the main takeaways. Something else to point out, too, he presented the judge 4 pieces of what he considered to be key evidence in this fight to keep these documents sealed. And one of them, the third aspect of this that he submitted, was actually a written letter from Becky Patty. And of course, that's the grandmother of Libby German. That letter was asking the judge and the court to keep those documents sealed. The other thing that the prosecutor submitted today was a petition, and it had more than 40,000 signatures on it from community members who agreed that the documents should be sealed. And one other quote that caught my attention from the prosecutor, a lot of people have been saying, well, it's in the public's interest to release those documents, to unseal them so we know what actually happened. The prosecutor said that is the public interest, finding justice for Libby and Abby.
That it is reasonable to believe that the media will cover this cause of action extensively, and the publicity will prejudice a fair trial. Frankly, where there is any sort of injustice, there will be a spotlight. Specifically pertaining to children, to the murders of 2 children that the country has grown to love and care about, the media is not going anywhere. And I think it's interesting now that there are facts to be revealed. The media is all of a sudden a huge problem when the family has done nothing but encourage their own media spotlight. So I think that's ironic. And it's interesting that now everybody cares about a fair trial for the accused child murderer more than keeping the community safe.
mother of Libby German, supports a petition drive demanding the court documents remain out of public view until it's necessary.
The bottom line is that's what we want. We want to be able to have a fair trial for the defendant and for the prosecution. And if our prosecutor feels that it's necessary to seal these documents for the time being, then I believe in him.
Becky tells me she supports the First Amendment, but she's concerned that internet sleuths and others will hurt the case even with redactions.
So why take a chance of letting these people bombarding them? So I mean, it's going to be tough enough for them to be witnesses. They don't need the extra stress. And I have seen that there's people out there that have said that our prosecutor is doing this to protect the family, so that we don't have to see what's in there. And that's not the case. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it just for our feelings. I have seen that there's people out there that have said that our prosecutor is doing this to protect the family, so that we don't have to see what's in there. And that's not the case. And that's not the case. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it just for our feelings. This case is too important, and we wouldn't want him to do it.